You can type in your question down there. I have another screen set up to take a look at all of the questions that you have. So whenever you have a question, just feel free to type it in there and we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Lisa. Thank you. So let's go to the next one. So no, one back. Thank you. So we have Ian Harlow here today. I've known Ian for well over 50 years. You know, I'm kind of dating myself here, but Ian has had some extensive experience of coaching and managing companies, and not only helping them with their culture, but also helping them with their hiring process. Certainly, what does that process look like? And that's some of the things that she has helped businesses with. We are going to talk about them today. We're not going to cover all of them, but we are going to talk about some of the key ones today. And then we'll ask Ann to come back again and kind of talk about some of the other ones. So, Ann, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me. Appreciate it.
So one other thing that we are going to do is we're going to mute all of you because we do record this session. So we don't want any background noise. We do publish it up on our website, and we publish it up on our YouTube channel, so you can get at it as many times as you like, and make sure that if you want to go back through and just make notes on it or listen to it again or share it with some other people, you certainly can do that also. So without any more hesitation, let's just go ahead and dive in. Lisa, let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk today about hiring effective team members, and the learning objective today is certainly defining the role. So let's go beyond what the job description is. So I think this is going to be a great part of the conversation. Advertising for the right person. How do we actually do that? Some of the interview questions that will get you to the best answers. Making the decision, don't do it by yourself, right? And then certainly the part that I think is probably the most important is successful onboarding. So I think that's always a key factor. So we'll get through that and kind of talk about it. Let's go to the next slide, Lisa. Ann, do we want to ask this poll question ahead of time?
I'd like to ask that poll question.
Okay,
so let's
Lisa,
jump
why don't you boot that up? All right, so for those of you who had that on your screen, go ahead and give it your best guess as to what you think it might cost to potentially replace a staff member who leaves your organization. And no, free is not an option. I think we got everybody. Let's take a look to see what we get. So looks like 33% said between 10 to 50% of salary, 17 between 50 to 150, and 50% said 75 to 125%.
Yeah, so these are some, interesting numbers. The correct answer, based on a variety of research, is that 50 to 150% of annual salary. And, that can cover, it sort of depends on what the role is. It depends on whether you've got internal candidates, how much advertising you have to do. But it also covers that onboarding process. So the time it's going to take to train somebody, let them, learn your systems, that kind of thing. So that's why there's such a range there, that 50 to 150%. It's not just throw an advertisement out there and then, I like the person, so I hire them. There's a lot more to it. And if we follow the process, it can be that kind of salary range. So if you've got, a lot of turnover, that is certainly something to address, because it can get really costly. I worked with an organization in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was kind of a joke in the industry that he was in, that he would hire people, he would hire warm bodies, he would train them, and then they'd go somewhere else. So other folks folks in his industry were appreciative of the training that he was providing so they could then hire his people. I started to share some numbers with him and he sat back and went, oh, I guess I should pay attention to this. I said, yeah, you really should. So I think it's important that we think about those statistics, how expensive it can get to replace a person, hire a new employee. And we're going to cover some of the hints and tips around that today.
Sounds great. Thanks. Yeah, that is just such a valuable information to be able to have, because I think it's just huge. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide there, Lisa, and kind of start talking about our conversation. So Ann and I are going to be kind of talking through the areas in the green, basically the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, and 7.
Just turned
out. We will schedule another time to have Ann on the program and go through 2, 4, and 6. And certainly, if there's anybody that wants to get some additional information, just let us know here and send me an email. We'd be happy to schedule a time to have you talk a little bit further with Ann and kind of move that through the process to help you if you're having some struggles with it. So, Ann, let's talk about identifying critical skills and behaviors. So help everybody understand kind of how do you view that and how do you approach it and go through it?
Yeah, that's you may think that, job description and identifying skills and behaviors are kind of the same thing. They're very, very closely connected, but let me kind of provide you with some context. So the job description essentially comes out of that first step, which is identifying the critical skills and behaviors. So an activity that I often take clients through in order to figure that out is, and I may pull some stuff if they already have a written job description, but I sit down with, the leadership team or whoever's involved in the hiring process, and I ask the question, define the ideal candidate. If you could actually build this person, what would be all the skills, behaviors, aptitudes that you want that person to have? And so, for example, if you're hiring for, customer service or customer facing, there's some things that you want to list in there. They should have great people skills, the ability to solve problems, be able to read people quickly and easily, good communication skills. So again, some of those things might be on the job description, but some of them kind of go beyond that. And it's important that you make a list of everything that you want and then go back to that list. And I usually do this if I'm live with a group of people. I usually do this on a couple of pieces of flip chart. We go back and we identify what are the things they must have, what are the things that are nice to have, and what are the things that I can train. So the must-have should be part of the advertising and part of the interview questions. So this all leads you through the process, but you've got to spend some time coming up with that list first. If it's not clearly defined, we may miss some really critical pieces that should be part of the process to hire the right person.
Yeah, some great points. So, and how important is it when you're doing that to understand what role that you're actually hiring for, whether it be sales, customer service, or another particular job position within the company? Is that really going to be important to kind of understand how does that match up within that particular skill set?
Yeah. So I actually go through this activity for any role that people need to hire for. So I go through the process of really identifying, again, all those skills, behaviors, aptitudes. What are you looking for in that ideal candidate? If you could have the perfect salesperson, if you could have the perfect, general manager, what does that look like? That lends itself to then creating the job description and vice versa. So you may already have job descriptions and you may pull from that. But I would do this per job role, so that everybody who's involved in the hiring process is clear on what you're looking for. Different people may have different ideas about what are the must-haves versus the things that are nice and can be trained. So do it for every single role that you're hiring for.
Yeah, I think that's certainly some good some good things to make sure we consider. So let's talk about like where do some of the behaviors go. A lot of that I would suspect also has to be is like what behaviors you want to see within the job, but also what behaviors you want to see inside the company, because this is a continued culture building process. Would you agree with that? I mean, we just don't want to pick somebody, kind of throw a dart at the dartboard, just pick somebody up and say, hey, this is who we're going to use. We really want to have a pretty high probability that they're going to fit inside of the culture, right?
Well, the word culture is just really critical.
Mhm.
Absolutely, you want somebody who fits with the culture. So I often say that the interview process, all of this process is kind of a mix between art and science, if you will. There's some of that, I have to go with my gut. How do I feel about this person? Do they seem like they would fit in the organization and with the culture? Did I hear something? Was there a question?
I'm not sure. It looked like there was some noise, but I think we're good.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure we weren't missing a question
No,
or
we're good.
comment. So again, yeah, the culture part, that really needs to go into those critical skills and behaviors. What kind of culture do you have? What kind of culture do you want? And make sure that you're hiring for that. I mentioned this earlier. If you've got people that are going to be customer facing, I've watched this in so many organizations. It just is kind of perplexing to me. I've watched people put people into customer service, for example, that never smile and don't seem to like people very much. Right. So I don't know if it was, somebody's nephew that they hired or, whatever that might look like. But it really does a disservice, not only to the role, but to the person that you've hired. You're setting them up for failure if we don't think about some of those behavior and culture pieces. So that's a great thing to stay focused on.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So again, I want to remind everybody, this platform is designed for you to learn. So if you have questions, please don't be shy. I certainly have a fairly large inventory to talk through with Ann. I know we won't get to all of them. So in the hour that we have till 1:00, but certainly if there's some things on your mind that you would like to ask, just go down at the bottom of your meeting and click on chat and you can type in a question. Let's kind of move Ann over to recruiting. So now we're going to start the process of recruiting, whether it's internal or external. So why don't you kind of share with the group kind of how do you look at that when you're going through the process?
Yeah. So the first step is to take a look at the must-haves. Those must-haves absolutely need to go into whatever advertising you're doing. You need to be creative. I suggest that people, do something to capture the attention of qualified and good candidates. If you're looking for somebody who's the best, you need to do something that draws their attention. You can't be like every other advertisement. So I'm going to go back to sales for just a minute. If I'm hiring for a salesperson, what are some of the things that are not only the must-haves, but that are unique about your organization that would draw some of the best people to you? So the advertisement isn't just what you're looking for, it's what you have to offer. And oftentimes people miss out on what you have to offer. Getting creative, and Lisa, I'm just going to ask you to go forward a couple slides and then we'll come back to the hiring process slide, if you wouldn't mind. So, sorry, go back to that one. Perfect. Folks, I love this particular advertisement. Now, I couldn't, apply for this position. Some of you might be able to solve this problem, but think about what it says. It captures your attention by saying problem solvers wanted. Yeah, they're looking for people who can solve problems. There's, more information that's down there in the lower right-hand corner, but they're looking for problem solvers. And look, here's your first problem to solve. So if there's somebody who can actually solve this problem, they've now got the phone number or the email or whatever it is to, get a hold of, that position and that opportunity. So right off the bat, they identified, here's two things that are really important. You need to be able to solve problems, and here's a problem for you to solve. And people who are taking the time to do that, they've got the initiative that is necessary to potentially interview them. So that's one creative example. Go on to the next one, Lisa. I love this one. So as long as kids get evenings and weekends off, so will you. I won't read the whole thing to you, but it's creative. They're looking for a bus driver. Like, why do you need to get so creative with a bus driver? Because here's what's important on hiring somebody to be a bus driver, and you want to sell the position as well as find the right person. And so I think that, creativity is just so critical in the recruiting process. And it doesn't mean necessarily you have to have pictures like this, although, pictures grab attention. And there's a lot of free places nowadays that we can, post opportunities. So, think about that as you're going into it. But number one, what are the must-haves? They've got to go in the advertisement somehow. Get creative, have some fun with it. If you want the best, you need to stand out. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question on the Microsoft is 0. So,
okay.
I don't know if we have any math experts on the meeting today, so that would be a great question for them, right? So, Terry asked a question. He says, what instruments do you use to screen people, PI, DISC, or MPO, or any of them all, or something different?
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily have a recommendation on the ideal tool. Vince and I use DISC for a lot of different reasons, and there's nothing wrong with having somebody take a DISC profile. One thing I want to caution you against with DISC, I'll address that first and then, add some information. But one thing I want to caution you against using DISC as a whole profile or, really helping you make the decision. Please understand that DISC is about communication and behavior styles, and those can be flexible. Those can be adjusted, right? So you may be talking to somebody who's a high S on the DISC scale, and that means that they're usually a little quieter. They like things in a very step-by-step fashion. They take a little more time to make decisions. They focus on feelings and emotions and people and building those relationships. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever hire an S like to be a salesperson, right? Because we think of salespeople as a little more energetic, a little more, out there. Vince, you've got a lot of S in you, for example, and you're an excellent salesperson. He does take things by a very step-by-step kind of approach, and he's focused on building relationships. So you may have in your mind that a good salesperson has to have that, outgoing, here I am kind of personality. And DISC, may say something different. Keep in mind, if in certain situations they've got to be a little more gregarious, people can adjust that. So don't use DISC as like the only criteria, but it may help you when you're kind of looking at your team and going, well, okay, we have, a bunch of S's and C's. Maybe we need a D or an I, but don't make that the full, context of your decision.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Remember, that's not the whole process, no matter which one of those assessments that you utilize. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the tools that you would want to make sure that you may use to kind of help you make a decision. Let's talk on the recruiting and as far as expectations and how you do it if you're going to open it up from an inside hire.
Yeah.
And how do we handle that, and in what order do we do that?
Yeah. So we still go through the same order, right? So we've already done the critical skills and behaviors. And then as a, hiring team, you want to ask yourselves, number one, do we have anybody in the organization that fits some of this? Right? They already know the company. They already know the culture. We're happy with the job that they've done. They have these skills that are, absolutely must-haves, right? So is there somebody that you already know fits the criteria, and do you want to interview them? I would always start internally. The second part of that, so if you've got somebody on, in mind, start with them before you post it for everybody to be aware of. But your employees can be a great source for networking. There may not be anybody internally who fits the role. One of the challenges you may have is somebody may think they fit the role and you don't believe they do. And when you post it for everybody, they may throw their hat in the ring, and that's okay. It's just a little tougher when they don't get the position. But anybody who, applies for the position, they're either a fit or they're not. And again, the more detailed you can be on that criteria, the better chance you're going to have of getting the right person. So see if you've got somebody, and then post it internally first, and then go outside.
Yeah, would you agree, Ann, that they probably should have some type of a criteria that's posted about how they hire from within versus outside, and certainly to make sure that if the person that may apply at a particular position doesn't get it, that that there'll be a conversation of what other skill sets they might need in order to move to a job, or is there another position they might be better suited for, right?
Yeah.
Before they start going outside to to look at the universe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point, again, it's still the same. It's the same criteria. We look at the must-haves. We see if anybody's got it. We see if anybody internally thinks they have it. We go through the interview process. Some people may surprise you. You didn't know that they actually, had some of the skills and talents that they do. And if you decide nobody internally is a fit, yes, that is when I would go to the outside. It's a coaching conversation at that point. Sally, you've got some really great skills. It's why you've been so successful in the position that you've got. For this particular role, here are some things that are missing. And we certainly can talk about how to grow in those areas. So the next time we have this kind of an opportunity, maybe you'd be a better fit.
Yeah, I think that's really great to understand. So let's move on then to number 5, which is the interview process.
Yeah.
I got to suspect that this is one of the ones, Ian, that most owners and people feel very uncomfortable with from any senses. So why don't you share a little bit on how you've kind of helped people walk through this and how you see this piece of it?
Perfect. Lisa, could you go down 1, 2, 3 slides? Sorry, I keep having you bounce back to the hiring process, and I'll do that, but let's just take a look at this. And I think this slide builds. Yeah. So a couple of things here. The first thing you need to do is you need to have an interview process. Who's going to screen? Who's going to interview? Are you going to interview as a team or one-on-one? Are you going to do Zoom calls for an interview, or have people come in person? Either of those can be effective. People have gotten very used to doing online interviews, virtual interviews at this point in time. I remember probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was interviewing for an opportunity and I hadn't used Zoom very much. And it was the weirdest experience because I didn't know where to look. I didn't know, it just was clunky and uncomfortable. I still got the position, but it wasn't as comfortable. Now I've done so many of these that it's comfortable. So you've got several options on how you're going to go about interviewing. And again, you have to have a process for that. You should have an interviewing team And then if you decide to do one-on-one interviews, each of those people in the team should be involved in the interview process. You should probably have some kind of a scoring system. So, a 1 to 5 scale, what criteria identifies a 1 versus what identifies a 5. So if you if you're working on this together, your idea of, let's say one of the must-haves is they need to have good problem-solving skills. Well, first of all, what questions are you going to ask to find that out? How are you going to, quote unquote, test them on that, right? And then on that 1 to 5 scale, do all of you agree on how you're going to score them? So that really needs to be done with those must-haves. Some of them are a little harder to score, so to speak, whether or not they have a outgoing personality. That can be very subjective. And so again, as a team, you've got to make some decisions. What does that scoring look like? And it shouldn't be just I like this person or I don't, right? Based on for the 1 through 5. Now that's a piece of it, but put it into a scaling scoring system. Mm-hmm. And then develop questions based on that identification of skills and behaviors, based on those must-haves. And you should be asking what are referred to as behavior-based questions. Behavior-based questions ask questions about what they have done, not what they would do. So this happens all the time in interviews. Tell me what would you would do if such and such happened. Don't ask it about how they would. Some people can answer those questions very well. We want to know what they have done around a certain situation. So what you're looking for from them is to identify a situation, tell you what actions they took, and then tell you what the result was. Now, sometimes we have to lead them through this just a little bit, but some of the words that actually provide, and I think I have that on this slide, do I not? Oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you. Not that I don't have these memorized, but some of the words that you might want to start a behavior-based question. Tell me about a time when you had a problem customer. What did you do and how did you solve it? So they have to describe the situation, and you can tell, by facial expressions, etc., if they're making it up or not. Right? So they have to think about a very specific time that they had a difficult, challenging customer that was causing some problems. What was the situation? What action did they take? And what was the result? And once they've described the situation, sometimes you need to lead them through to the action and the result. Oh yeah, I had this customer. This is what happened. She was just really difficult. These are the reasons why. And they may forget to tell you what they did and then what the result was. Oh, okay. So what action did you take? How did you manage that situation? So that's really the goal with behavior-based questions, is to think about what they have done versus what they would do. We all know what we would or should do in a whole bunch of different scenarios. Doesn't mean that we've always done it. Have you ever? Describe a time, describe a situation where you, give me an example of. So think about those words when you're crafting a question. And I would say that one of the big questions not to ask, you don't want to ask the question, and I call these wasted questions. So tell me about yourself. How does that get you the specific information that you're looking for? And, you want to narrow that down. Tell me a little bit about the last role that you had where you were working with customers. That's going to get you some very specific information, as opposed to, again, that wasted question, tell me about yourself. So we're trying to get specific answers. We need data in order to make some decisions, and behavior-based questions are going to do that. Does anybody have any questions on behavior-based questions?
Remember, down at the bottom is the chat box, so feel free to go ahead and put your questions in there. So, Ann, I have a question on this, and I know you and I have talked about this a lot, but I want you to share it with the group. Is how many people interviewing actually ask behavior-based questions, or is it really just about their resume and the job position?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't have a specific percentage. I know that the data is out there, but I'm just going to tell you based on my experience. What I see happening with most interviews is that the person who's doing the interview doesn't even look at the resume until the person's sitting in front of them. So they're asking a lot of, like I said, wasted questions. I rarely hear behavior-based questions. And we get, some things like, sell me this pencil. Well, that's great if you sell pencils. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily help with, some of that criteria we're looking for. So if I had to make a guess on percentage of managers who ask behavior-based questions, I would say certainly less than 30%.
Okay.
Probably close to that 15-20%.
Yeah, so the reason why I asked the question is I wanted, I know we've got some HR folks on and some other folks, is to really kind of, if you're not asking behavioral-based questions and having a process, this is the time to maybe, rethink a little bit about how you're doing that. This is such a critical piece, and of certainly hiring people is such a challenge now anyway, because there's not very many good people out there that you want to bring in.
Yeah.
So when you get them, you want to make sure whoever you're bringing in for interviews and talking to, that you make the most out of it so that you can better evaluate if this person is a good fit in many ways also. So it's really, really critical to make sure that you kind of go through some of these things and to kind of appeal to the new generation of how you have those conversations. I think it's pretty straightforward. The way you have a conversation today is different than even 2 or 3, 4, 5 years ago, and certainly significantly different than 10 to 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, if you ask, folks from the newer generations, man, I'm making myself feel old here. Maybe I am. If you ask millennials, and younger, questions that we get used to get asked, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? They look at you like, are you crazy? I don't know. I'm just always looking for the next best thing. And our goal with that really is to, try to keep the next best thing always in our organization. They don't always have to go someplace else, but they always want to be challenged. I mean, there's some things we need to understand about the different generations. That's a whole different conversation. But to your point, if we create these behavior-based questions as a team, we're getting to the very specifics, and we aren't asking a lot of, again, I call them wasted questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's talk about some of the other things that you kind of do through the interview process real quickly. And are there any don'ts that you don't want to do during the interview process?
Well, certainly you don't want to ask illegal questions. And I have seen, wow, way, way too many managers not even know what those illegal questions are. So you can't talk about whether or not they're married. You can't talk about whether or not they have children. You can't talk about their religion. You can't talk about any of those things. Now, let's say that they offer up some information, because sometimes that just comes up in conversation. Let's say that you've got, a mom who, is inquiring about, what the starting time is, because she's got kids that she needs to get to daycare, right? There's a variety of ways to answer that question, but her responsibility for daycare is hers. You can't start asking questions like, well, who do you currently have for your daycare? Isn't there somebody else who can take them, right? You can't ask those kind of questions. You state the hours of the position. If if it's an hourly, based position. And, if there's some flexibility, maybe the job starts at 8 o'clock and she can't be there till 8:15. It's okay to kind of have that piece of the conversation, but you can't give her directives on how she's going to manage taking care of her children. Let's say you've got somebody who's pregnant that comes in. We can't ask questions like, when are you due? We can't, that shouldn't be part of the criteria for hiring. Again, there's a fine line there because we have to know when they're available and when they're not. But whatever your criteria is, you figure out what you can be flexible about and what you can't. Stay focused on what the role entails and go from there.
Yeah, great points. Great points. All right, let's move into onboarding. The kind of the wow factor, right? As I call it, is, when somebody has been hired on and they come into the company, do they leave at the end of the day and they just feel kind of in awe of knowing that they made the right decision, and they share that with their family, friends, or significant other, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
All right. So you've sold the person on the job. You think they're the right candidate. You want to make sure that you aren't going to have to go through this process again anytime soon, right?
We hope.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of times after managers have completed the whole interview, provide the offer, all of that, they kind of think their job is done, except for the person that that person will actually be reporting to. So there's some things that need to happen that first day, that first week, to really make sure that the person feels like they made the right decision. And onboarding is so important to the longevity of an employee. If they get started, they come in the first day, there's no technology set up for them. The manager is super busy and doesn't have time to introduce them to anybody. They're kind of standing around drinking a cup of coffee going, well, what have I got myself into? This isn't what they sold me, right? We're getting off to a really, really bad start, and it rarely gets better after that. So it's about that first impressions thing, right? You've interviewed them. Maybe they've met a few of the managers because that's part of the, hiring team. But what are you going to do on that first day? So start before the first day. What do they need to have on day one? The technology. And a lot of times your HR will do this, right? But the direct manager should be involved as well. Prepare the technology, develop a welcome process, maybe a packet that contains everything that they need, including the schedule for the week. Spend some time on day one doing what I refer to as the getting to know you process. What a few companies have done that has been very successful, I've recommended that they do a 30 to 60 minutes in each department. So, John, you're going to be working directly for me, and I'm excited about that. Want to get you learning what happens in our department, in your particular role. But I think it works best if you also know what happens around the organization. So I'm going to have you spend some time with each of the departments, just so you know how everything fits together. And then each manager of that department would then be responsible for introducing them to the people in that department. Be prepared for, talking about who's going to share with them. It could be another employee. Here's what we do in this department. Here's how it fits into the organization. Here's how it fits into the mission, vision, and values. Excuse me. I think a lot of that, if you do that on day one, certainly they get to know people, they feel welcomed. It's a good start to, getting together with your organization. I remember one time I was talking to somebody who had been with a company for over a month. And there were people, he had never met people in other departments. Now, yes, he could have taken the initiative, right, to go to other departments and introduce himself. But why should he do that? He's the new guy. So if we do this on day one, I think it really makes a difference in just feeling more comfortable in the organization. Now, day two, I often recommend that that's what I call resource day. So all the HR stuff that they have to go through, the technology, processes, maybe some online training if that's what needs to be done, getting comfortable in their space, right? Setting up their desk, all those kinds of things. Now, sometimes depending upon how big the organization is, the things on day one and day two can all be done on the same day. Nothing wrong with that. But these are some steps that really need to be taken care of. On day three, I think it's another relationship building opportunity, but specifically with the department, the specific people that person is going to be working with. So, sometimes we've done, team building activities on that day with just that department. Sometimes it's just a matter of, going out to lunch as a team. So spend a little time with the manager, or if you are a manager, with your direct reports, building those relationships, asking questions, setting the stage for expectations. And one of the things I always like to ask as a manager is, what is your expectation of me? I know what I expect of them, and I want to make sure I make that clear. But what's your expectation of me as a manager? How can we best work together? And that's a good thing to be doing sort of on that day three. On day four is a little bit of on their own. Spend some time going through their notes, thinking about what they've, gone through just on the first couple of days. Starting to get into, if you have specific processes or a specific software they need to learn, that's a good day to get started with that. By no means is any of this just done after the first week, but these are some things that should be included in that first week. And at the end of the week, get some feedback from them. How did things go this week? How are you feeling? Do you feel like you made a good decision? What kind of support do you think you might need moving forward? Did you see anything in the organization that kind of struck you as odd? And we just aren't seeing it because we've been here for so long. When somebody's only been there for a week, they see things sometimes that the rest of us don't. So those are just a few hints on the onboarding process.
Yeah, I think those are just fantastic things for companies to do. I know just from some experiences, a lot of it is not being done out in the business world, which can cause, I think, as we have talked about over the years, is it creates a lot of turnover because people are just not satisfied, right? There's a lot of people leaving work because they're not satisfied. It's never really about the money. It's about the experience and how much can they contribute to building something, and to be proud of that and to understand what that really means, right?
Yeah.
And then certainly if they do end up staying, it's almost like it just doesn't create that culture that we keep talking about, is like, what kind of a quality person do we really have here? We probably had a really good quality person, but maybe now they're just kind of a little bit turned off. I'll use that phrase, is like, they're just, wow, what did I get myself into, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it happens all the time. And there's so many things that organizations can do to avoid that. Let's create a situation. Let's create a process, like some of the things that I just shared, that really sets an employee up for success. And therefore, we end up with somebody who's going to be a long-term employee who really feels like they're contributing.
Yeah. So if we go back to the start of our conversation, today, and we asked everybody to go through a survey as to what does it cost to replace somebody. And so Anne had helped us to understand that cost will range between 50 to 150%, certainly depending on the position and the training and the things of that nature that would be impacted, from doing that. And so I want to go back to how do you put yourself in a business to not have to worry about paying for that as much and keep hiring people? And I think as you go through these 4 steps that we talked about today, both identifying the critical skills and the behaviors, certainly the recruiting process, and then the interview. But then when you get to that onboarding, kind of like that frosting on the cake is like, here's where we're going to really get started with this thing. And I called it earlier is the wow factor is you want them to go home that first day and just in their mind, they know they made the right decision. And they know they made the right decision enough to share that with their family, friends, or whomever they just may be talking to in general that they run across that the topic comes up. And I think that that's really, really important because this helps to reduce that kind of cost, especially in a market like we have today. I think it's applicable in every single market. Certainly when you have the impact that we have today, it makes it even more critical to make sure that these steps are being followed and that you're executing at a very, very high level, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to go ahead and open it up again. If anybody has any additional questions that they would like to ask, and there's a chat box down at the bottom. Feel free. I've got the chat box up here, so I'd be happy to get any questions over to Ian that you have on any of these processes that we talked about. So I'm just going to give everybody just a minute, just kind of think if they do have a question, and you and I may talk just a little bit more. So I'm just going to give them a minute to do so.
Yeah.
And hey, Vince, this is Terry, and I'm going to do the old-fashioned method of
Go ahead.
just talking. And I agree with you on the behavioral interview questions. I think sometimes we get so focused on facts and figures that it takes a little patience to ask the behavioral question, because you have to say, tell me about a time when you were caught between making a decision that was in favor of the company or in favor of the customer, and you had to choose, something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it usually begins, as you say in your slide, tell me about a time, or have you ever, those are pretty high yield if you're patient and willing to listen to the full answer, because sometimes they kind of grind on. Those are really effective questions. So I agree with you. I agree. And I think we underdo it by a lot.
Yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone. As we've discussed, very few managers, even if they know about behavioral-based questions, very few actually use them effectively. And sometimes it's really a matter of, just not having a hiring process, not working with a team that you develop these questions together. It's a matter of, HR said, you 3 people are going to interview this candidate. And the first about the person is when they're sitting on the other side of the desk and you're reading their resume.
Yeah, exactly.
So plan a little, and it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with it, Terry, and both Ian is. I think when you take a look at it is about what is our hiring process, and I think when you have, like, we call it a people process, is like, who do we really think that we want to see inside this company over time, and almost and you kind of end up filling up somewhat of a succession plan, but like, who might we need in each position, and what skill sets and behaviors are we looking for in each one of those areas? Right? Because those can be very, very informative and helpful as you kind of go through the process. So, Ian, thanks so much for being here today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully the people listening, I know they got a lot out of it. I want to remind everybody that we have recorded this session, so it will be up on our website and on our YouTube certainly by tomorrow. And if you want to go back in there and re-listen to it, or listen to parts, or share it with somebody or your team, certainly I think you would be benefited from going back and listening to Ian and talking through some of the parts. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to give us a call here or an email at Prometis Partners. We'll be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. Let's talk about May. Certainly, as we kind of round the corner in spring, with here in the beautiful state of Michigan, we're starting to get a little bit warmer. We're going to be talking about operational strategies and operations, and we have two individuals that I've worked with a little bit here, and Will and Mike Craig, and they do a great job of operations, and they are going to be here to talk as panelists and talk about lean manufacturing and operations in general. So I think Mike is on the meeting here today. I think, Mike, if you're still here. So this is going to be a great conversation that we have from them. So if operations is something that you really have been taking a look at, do you want to certainly be there to ask them some questions to kind of see how can you get a little bit better at it, and so on and so forth. So again, we will have that on May the 17th, again, 12 o'clock Eastern time that we will be doing it. So again, we want to thank everybody for being here today. Thanks for taking an hour out of your time during a busy schedule. And we will make sure that we had this recording up. Casey, you asked if we will have we don't have a projected date yet for sections 2, 4, and 6, but Ann and I will collaborate and make sure that we get a date on that, and we'll come back and talk about that also. So thanks for asking that question. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Hope that you have a great day and an awesome week, and we look forward to seeing you on the 17th of May. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.